And we're live.
We are live. Hello, everybody. I am Bart Robley, and I'm here with four of the greatest drummers on the face of the planet: Jeremy Steinkohler, Rick Stojak, Chip Ritter, the guy right below me, Chip Ritter. And then
Yeah,
on
Chip.
the other side of me over here,
Yeah.
our guest, I'm pointing the wrong way. There he is right there, Rob Farrell. Rob, how
Hi
are
guys.
you?
I'm doing
Rob.
well. Doing
Right
well.
on, man. It's so good to see you. Rob is a dear friend. He's actually in South County. He's in between myself and Rick. Rick's down in San Diego. He's down there in the Mission Viejo area. And not only is he such an amazing drummer, he's such an accomplished player. He has such an amazing career as a performer, recording sessions, and as a teacher. And if you go to his website, robferrell.com, he puts up transcriptions for free, and his transcriptions, I use them all the time. He's actually
Mm-hmm.
my first go-to. Like, hey, I need a chart for a student. I go there. If he doesn't have it, then I go someplace else. But I go there because I know he probably does have it. And if he does have it, there it is. It's right. The transcription's correct. Go figure. He transcribed the song correctly. The guy's phenomenal. So, Rob, it's an honor to have you on. Oh, and I got to say this before I jump in. He studied with Roy Burns from Aquarian Drumheads. And this guy, his left hand, he has got a left hand traditional grip like you can't believe. I can bang out 2 and 4 with the best of them, but Rob over here, man, his left hand's phenomenal, just phenomenal. Rob, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's a real pleasure and a real honor.
This is great, man. This is great. Now you're in your home studio right now, and tell us a little bit about your studio. Talk to us a little bit about that and about your teaching.
Okay. Well, do you want like the history of my teaching, how I started, or just
Yeah,
about the
sure.
home studio?
Yeah,
Love to hear
sure.
that.
Because we share a
Okay, so
teacher.
How'd you start?
well, I got into it kind of default. So one of the guys that Bart studied with is the guy that I studied with. So after I studied with Roy, I wanted to study with Greg Bissonette because he was a huge influence when I was really starting to get into I think I want to do this full time. And I was fortunate enough to meet Greg at a NAMM show, and I asked him, hey, could I take lessons? At the time, he was playing with David Lee Ross, so he was a little bit busy. So he said, all I do is group lessons. And I wasn't really interested in group lessons, so I told him, I said, no, I really like the one-on-one mentor type teaching situation. So he said, well, my roommate, Tony Pia, he and I grew up in Detroit together. We both went to North Texas State. I recommended him for Maine and Ferguson when I got the Roth gig. You could study with him. So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Long story short, Tony at the time was playing with Edgar Winter, and he would go on tour. And he told me, actually, he didn't ask me. He told me, he said, I need you to teach my students on Friday, the ones I have down in South County. And I told him, like, oh man, I'm not
No
a
pressure.
teacher. Yeah, I'm not a
Right.
teacher. I'm trying to learn how to play myself. And he's like, no, you can totally teach these kids. They're beginners. You got this. So he got me into teaching. So I started teaching out of my home and doing house calls just with Tony's teacher, or Tony's students rather. Then I started teaching out of a Mars Music. I don't know if you guys remember Mars. It was kind of like a Guitar Center knockoff. So I did that for 2 years. And then the store went out of business. So then I ended up opening a big, large music school in Anaheim Hills, which is kind of closer to where Bart lives.
Right.
And I had a business partner, super cool guy, but I realized I wasn't cut out to have a business partner. We were always kind of doing this.
Yep.
So then I kind of came full circle, and I went back to teaching out of my house, which is actually my favorite way to teach. The only thing I haven't done is teach like in a high school or university setting. But I mean, I've done the mobile teaching, which I don't really care for, the house call type stuff. I've done music school, like teaching out of a music store, which is great. Really good experience for me. But my home studio is my favorite because even though I'm a pretty mellow guy, I'm one of those kind of control freaks where I like to be in charge of everything. So yeah, I teach my Bart's in my home studio. It's pretty humble. Well, it's very humble. It's nothing like your guys. I'll tell you that. I just have about a quarter of my garage sectioned off, and I have a side door. The students kind of come in. It's a little different now with the COVID thing, but yeah, normally I have a steady stream of students. They come in, we do the lesson, and that's it. I actually love teaching. I mean, I'm at a stage in my life now that I'm getting older. I actually prefer teaching to performing now.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
great. That's great. How many students do you have, Rob?
Right now I have 62 a week. Prior
Whoa.
to COVID, prior to
Wow.
COVID, I was bouncing around. If my roster is completely full, I can have 72. But they don't all come every week. There's always like
Right.
kids,
Yeah.
sporting events, school events, vacations. Sometimes I have to take time off. But on my roster, pre-COVID, there was 68. Just maybe 2 weeks ago, I got it back up to 62. So I'm like, okay, cool. it's
Good.
starting to get back up.
So are you teaching
Excellent.
mostly half-hour lessons then with all those students?
Yeah, the vast majority is half hour. So when I say 62 students, some of those are our students,
Mhm.
but the hour students I count as 2 slots because it's
Gotcha.
half hour.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that's
it's
what I-
not it's not 72 hour students.
Right.
Right. Right.
Figured as much.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Now you said that things have changed since COVID, where you have people coming in and out. What are you doing different? Just out of curiosity, what's happening different for you?
Okay, well, I'm sure like you guys, many of my students opted for online.
Right.
So I told Bart when we talked on the phone, I've been doing online lessons since about the mid 2000s, but they're not my preferred way of teaching because I just really like the one-on-one in-person feel. And I don't advertise them. I have never advertised them on my website. The only time I ever offered them was if I had a student that moved away and couldn't find a suitable drum teacher. And actually what happened was that exact scenario happened, and a mom said, why don't we do it online? And I was like, oh, and I had the old external iCam I had mounted in my old garage, and that's how I got into doing it. So when COVID first hit, I did about 2 weeks of nothing, and then some of my students wanted to do online, so I've been doing online. When things kind of opened up a little bit, now what I do is I make everybody wear a mask. I wear a mask, and my students used to wait by the gate that leads to my side door to the garage. Now
Right.
I just have everybody wait in their car and wait for the student to leave, the previous student. And when they're coming up, I just spray and wipe down. If a parent wants to stay in with me, obviously there's certain situations where I require that. They're 6 feet away and they're masked too. So a lot of my students, it's funny, they were hesitant to do the online lesson. And then because of COVID, everything's changed, and a lot of the kids are doing school online, obviously, or hybrid. And they're like, hey, this is cool, man. I can actually take my lesson in my pajamas and not have to drive to Rob's. So a lot of my students, even though things have lightened up, they're like, hey, would you mind if we stick with online lessons? And I'm like, okay, I would prefer them not to, but if they want to do that, that's fine.
Rob, you mentioned that sometimes you require parents to sit in on the lesson. What situation is that like where you do that?
Okay, so if I have a young female student, I never teach them by myself.
Right.
When I taught at music schools, they had like doors with windows at the least. Like Mars Music had that.
Yeah.
When I had my old music school, we had that as well. And then after I left, my business partner ended up putting up like cameras. So yeah, I don't want to put myself in any compromising position. So yeah, if I have a young female student, I always make the parent stand with me. And I don't think I've ever had to tell a mom or a dad that, except for one time. they said, "Oh, is it cool if I leave?" And I said, "No, I'd prefer you to stay." And then after they left at the end of my teaching day, I emailed them and I just kind of explained myself and said, "Listen, I just, I would feel more comfortable." And then they actually appreciated that I did that.
That's great.
What's the age range of your students, Rob?
Okay, so that's a funny story. People ask me that all the time. So when I taught at Mars Music, there was a really young office manager. He was probably 22. And I strolled in one day to teach, and he goes, "Hey, man, I got you a new student." And I was like, "Awesome." And I couldn't say no, or I had no say in who wanted to study. He booked a 2-year-old.
Oh.
Oh man!
And I remember telling him, I was like, "Dude, 2 years old. 2 years old, they can barely talk, let alone like sit at anything." He's like, "Well, I booked it." So anyhow, go ahead.
Just for the record, I've seen some 2-year-olds on YouTube just shredding, but go ahead.
This kid is probably could have been one of those if they had YouTube back then, because he came in with his dad. His dad was the coolest guy. First thing his dad said, he's like, "Hey, I know what you think. I'm not one of those guys that think my kid's a prodigy, but I do think he might have something. And I want to make sure that if he does have something, I want to give him a solid foundation." So the kid never said one word to me. He was so shy. And I had that office guy bring in one of the little toy kits they had at Mars Music,
Yeah.
Right.
I taught the dad how to read, like just basic, 3-limb independent stuff. I taught him how to read and count at the same time as his boy so that he could work with him at home. If only all my students practiced like this little kid. He would come in every week prepared. He'd sit down, wouldn't say a word to me, so shy, and he would just lay it down. And I was like, okay. So when I first started teaching, I kind of had an unspoken rule, like, okay, I don't want to take anybody under 8 because I need attention span. And I do a lot of kit stuff, so I want to make sure that everybody can reach the pedals. This kid changed that. So now, if somebody, like my youngest student right now is 4. My oldest student is 68, I think. He's either 67 or 68. And I was telling Bart, I'm sure you guys have noticed this too, but when I first started teaching, I rarely had I'm 55, so I'm considered a senior now, but I rarely had senior citizens. And now I have probably right now on my roster 7, I think I have 7 guys that have retired, and I've had a steady stream of those on my roster. And what I've noticed is these guys, they've always had a passion for drumming, but they put their families and careers first. Then they retire, and then they kind of lose that identity that they had. And then their friends start dying because they're not exercising their brains and they're nervous. So they're like, "You know what? I want to do something that I've always wanted to do, and I want to keep my brain sharp." So it's awesome. Obviously the vast majority of my students are kids, I would say like grade school through high school. The smallest demographic I have right now is college age kids. I do have some.
Oh, really?
But not many. And the ones I have are usually pretty flighty, just because every semester, their schedules change, their work changes. Money situation, that type of thing. But I have a pretty good range of students now, which I'm thankful for because I enjoy it. There's different challenges teaching, because the old guys come in and they're all like, "Oh, I can't teach an old dog new tricks." And I got to break through that crusty exterior of life beating them down to let them know, like, "Hey, man, if you want to do this, just relax and have fun with it,"
Yeah.
Rob, this makes me want to ask you about how you work with the really young kids, because I've had a little bit of experience with that too. I mostly don't take kids under 8 years old, but I have in the past taught 4, 5, 6-year-olds, and that was a learning experience for me, figuring out how to work with them, right? Getting a tiny little kid in the room. Have you developed like a curriculum or a different approach for working with the youngest kids?
Yeah, people ask me all the time about like, oh, what's your curriculum? So I kind of have a curriculum, which, believe it or not, is based off of what I learned from the three really amazing teachers I had.
Mhm.
But I learned early on that I couldn't take a student and cram them into my curriculum
Yep.
because every
Yeah.
student, regardless of whether they're the same age, they're different. So
Right.
what I call my curriculum a floating curriculum. So it kind of depends. So yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, I definitely teach. Like my 4-year-old, I got to teach him different. So
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
the first, one of the first
Yeah.
things I do is I find out what they're into, which is usually like, Minecraft and all
Yeah.
the video games and cartoons and stuff. And a lot of times I'll use like theme songs from video games, their favorite video games or their favorite cartoons. Or I know you guys have used like insect stuff, like, if you want like bumblebee, grasshopper, like stuff like
Yeah.
that, or grasshoppers. So a lot of times I'll do that, but if I'm trying to teach them like note values, but a lot of times too, I'll do the same thing, but with like Minecraft or Star Wars or whatever they're into. And then once they kind of see that, like, oh man, this hard, boring stuff on the pad, this guy's making it fun because he's relating it to something I like. They tend to like that a lot better. But yeah, definitely I have to. And there's a patience quotient too when you're dealing with a little
Yes.
one.
Mhm.
Most
So
Mhm.
one of the main reasons, actually, there's two reasons why I left that lucrative music studio I had. One was just differences of opinion with that business partner I alluded to earlier, and two, 2 years after I opened that music school, my son was born. And I realized, like, they don't give you 24-hour notice if they're going to be sick. Or so if I have a really young kid, I would say anywhere from like maybe 4 to 8. I tell the parents, hey, if they're super cranky, don't bring them, because I don't want them to associate drum lessons with something negative. So that's
Mhm.
been a huge help for me. And because I teach out of my home studio, I don't have a lease, I don't have cam charges, I don't have tons of utility, I don't have to worry about other teachers, to take care of. So I can be a little bit more flexible with my scheduling as far as like maybe squeezing in a makeup. Or I tell them if they're super cranky and I don't have room for a makeup, I say, just don't worry about it. I'm not going to charge you, because there is nothing worse than dealing with a kid that doesn't want to be at a lesson. And I
Yep.
had that at Mars Music. I'll never forget. And this is
Mhm.
another thing that kind of made me go, yeah, this is how I'm going to run my business. Yeah, I had a kid sit in front of me, and you could totally tell his parents were making him do it. Who's your favorite band?
Mhm.
I don't know. What kind of music do you
Hmm.
like? I don't know. And
I
that
don't
half
know.
an hour of that. Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah,
Yeah.
that was
That's
awful.
that's why I have
Oh
I just
man.
I just I just teach songs and I have Bart come in and teach rudiments to all my students.
There
I
you
need a
go.
raise.
Yeah, getting the kids to learn the rudiments is tricky. So I try to
Yeah.
I try to make it be more fun. But it's, yeah, and then that's why you see all those transcriptions on my site. That's how I get my kids to read, and adults too. Oh man, the adults are
Oh yeah.
really hesitant. Like, oh, I can't read. They've got the reading phobia or whatever.
Yeah.
But once I let them know, I don't start them out on songs right away. I start them out with some of the stuff that I started out with when I was younger. Then I try to get them to songs as quickly as possible, because I mean, I'm sure you guys feel the same way. But when you teach a song, number one, you're teaching them everything that they need to know to be a good drummer. You're teaching them, the coordination. You're teaching them reading. You're teaching them phrasing. You're
Yep.
teaching them
Mhm.
time. You're teaching them fills. And when they're done,
Yep.
instead of going to their friends like, look, I can play page 11 out of the Funky Primer, which nobody's going to care about. They go, look, I can play this song. And they put the tune on. If they have family over or whatever for a holiday, they can play a song. And I just think it's really cool. That's my preferred way of teaching, kind of a little bit more comprehensive.
When you
Rob,
do songs,
Rob,
go ahead, Chip.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
I was just wondering, I was thinking about questions for today and looking you up online and checking out your stuff. And I just had, my question's kind of generic, but I still want to know, can you tell us a couple of your favorite aspects of teaching? Like what's the spark there for you as far as teaching in general when you're talking about drum lessons on the kid?
Okay, that's probably going to be my favorite question of the day, because when I was younger, I had amazing parents, but they didn't want me playing drums. So when I was really little, I got a toy set with the paper head, and I broke it in probably a day. And then I got this amazing set from Sears. I don't know if you guys remember, because
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm older than you guys. But
No.
I got
you're not.
I got a 4-piece blue drum set from Sears, and I love that thing. But of course, I was young and not very disciplined, and I made a lot of noise. So my parents took it away. They got rid of it. Broke my heart. Then when I got into junior high and I saw like, I could do like jazz band, they didn't let me do anything musical. So I ended up getting a pair of beat up sticks from a friend, and I would play on my bed with my headphones to my records and cassettes. And, no YouTube, no way for me to learn.
Right.
So the first couple teachers I had were terrible. And then I got with 4 really amazing teachers, especially the last 3 were like hugely influential for me. So when Tony made me teach, number one, the first thing that went through my head is, I want to be the teacher that I wanted to have and never had. That's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
I know Bart,
Well said.
Bart and I talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, do you guys want me to give you a little history about like the first couple terrible teachers
Please.
I had?
Yeah, sure. Dude.
Yeah, that's
Because
fine.
you know
So
what, I think that I say that sometimes to my students too. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, I've had the incredible opportunity of having some amazing drum teachers, and I've had the incredible opportunity of having some terrible drum teachers. But I'm serious about it, because there's been times where I sit down with somebody and it's like, what the heck? Why am I paying for this? So I get where you're coming from. So go ahead. Yeah, please do.
So when I was 16 and I got, my first little job and could afford drum lessons, like probably most of us, you study with a local guy. So the first guy I studied with was an older guy, very accomplished drummer. And obviously I'm not going to mention names, but this guy was like so cranky and grumpy. I think he was like bitter that he didn't make it big. But I remember I went to lessons with him for about 3 months, and it was painful. And I told him, I want to learn how to read and I want to learn my rudiments. So he gave me like Mary Had a Little Lamb written out and wanted me to play it. And I remember thinking, gosh, when am I going to use Mary Had a Little Lamb, like on a set? So I asked him, I said, I appreciate, because I want to learn how to read, but why do I have to learn this piece? And his response was, because I told you so. So I remember going, okay.
Brutal.
So one of my favorite rock drummers of all time is Stuart Copeland. I love the Police. I graduated high school in '83. I grew up with the Police, and I mean, he's the reason why I like a tight snare. I like 13-inch hi-hats and splash cymbals. He was like, oh man, he's my favorite rock drummer. So I remember one time I brought in a cassette, and I
had to do it.
I gave it to him. That was perfect. I gave him I showed him the cassette, and I said, hey, this is my favorite rock drummer, and I want to learn this little passage that he's playing. And he went on to just rip Stuart. Oh, that guy's terrible. He's not playing anything new. he rushes, he's awful. And I just remember going, okay. So I stopped taking lessons with him. I took a break for, I don't know, a few months. The next guy I studied with was a young guy, but I mean, he was like Spicoli from Fast Times. You know, I'd show up for my lesson and he'd be recovering or half baked. And you know, I'm paying my own money, and he would literally waste 5 to 10 minutes of the lesson, like, oh, what did we work on last week? So I lasted, he was nice, but I didn't learn anything. So then I took a break for, geez, probably 3 or 4 years. But then my bad technique caught up with me, and I gave myself tendinosis in my right elbow. I started having probably what would have turned into carpal tunnel syndrome in my right hand. And because I played a lot of traditional, I didn't have a good fulcrum. So I had a bone bruise on my thumb that took like a million years to heal.
On your thumb or here, on here?
On the base of my thumb, like down here. Because I didn't have a tight fulcrum. So I don't know if you guys can see.
Yeah.
I don't have my reading glasses on, but so you know, when I'm cracking backbeats, I tore myself up. So I was at a point where I'm like, okay, I think I might want to do this, you know, for a living, but I've got problems. And at that time I was subscribing to Modern Drummer magazine, and I was reading all of Roy Burns' concept articles.
Yeah.
And I saw an ad in a I can't, it wasn't the Recycler. I forget, it was some like one of those music rags. I can't remember which one. But it said that Roy Burns was teaching at Strike Zone Percussion in Garden Grove. And I was like, no way. Because at the time I lived in Orange. So I call him up and he's like, yeah, $60 for an hour lesson. And I was like, okay, you know. And I studied with Roy in about 2 months. He squared my hands away. And because, my technique was terrible. And I'm still working on it. But he's the guy that really got me into reading. The thing too about Roy is he taught me so much about life and the music industry. I mean, I know you guys
hey,
are
Roy.
Aquarian guys, and he just was literally one of the most amazing men. I'd see him at NAMM like 20 some odd years after lesson, and he'd remember everything. He remembered everything about our lessons together. So instrumental. I mean, he was the first like really amazingly good teacher that I had. And then I wanted to study with Greg, and since he couldn't do it, he recommended his roommate Tony Pia, which of course Bart studied with. And Tony's just like the most underrated, under the radar drummer. He is so good, it's just incredible. So he really helped me to develop a lot more like my double bass chops and stuff, as well as like the whole Ted Reed syncopation system stuff. And then the last guy I studied with was Chuck Silverman, who was like ridiculously cool and good too. So he kind of helped me with a lot of the, obviously the Afro-Caribbean type stuff. So
he was at PIT when you studied with him, or no?
No, I studied with him way before that. He lived up in the valley, so which is where I took with Tony too. But yeah, he wasn't at PIT at that time. He did that after. Yeah,
I tried to study with Chuck. Matter of fact, I had one scheduled. I had a lesson scheduled with him, and it was on a Sunday. On the day of the lesson, he called and canceled because it was a gig or something came in. But I never got to study with him. But man, he was, what a great player he was, man. What a great player.
And a teacher, man. It's like, it's one thing like Roy.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to be a great player. It's another thing to be a great teacher. It's an anomaly to be both. And the guys, that's why I try to pattern my teaching, like Bart said, it's actually a good thing to have studied with either bad teachers or more, it's more likely just the wrong teacher for you, because then you kind of learn what to do and what not to do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I totally agree with that. Now, I want to circle back around to this for a minute, Rob. You said that like when you teach songs, right? And again, using your transcriptions all the time and stuff. Do you start like when, okay, we're going to learn a song, we're going to go to this song, or do you do some of the play alongs, like maybe with Tommy Igo and stuff? Do you do any of that stuff?
I use a lot of the those drumless tracks that are on YouTube.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay, cool.
Because one of the things that happens a lot with me is that kids don't know what they want to do, what they want. When I was a kid, if you asked me who my favorite drummers were, who my favorite bands were, I'd be like this. Nowadays, they're like, I don't know. So that's when I'll use those playlists on YouTube. I'll find something that gets them moving, and then I'll just like hand write out grooves and simple fills.
Guys,
Rob.
I got to interrupt for a second. Somebody maybe change their audio settings because we're getting an echo now.
Yeah, I'm hearing
getting
that
that
too.
Yeah, I'm getting echoed.
Did
Does
anybody
anybody
change your settings?
Facebook.
I didn't touch anything.
Mine's the same.
Yeah, I'm getting the echo.
That's better now for me.
Yeah, whatever happened. Yeah, I hear it. Up, it's back. That's
That's
weird.
weird.
Echo. Test for echo.
Testing. Yeah, I'm hearing it come back. You guys hear it? Are you hearing it, Rob?
Now I'm hearing it again. Yeah.
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 Echo.
That's strange. Jeremy, what did you do?
Yeah. I breathe funny, I guess. I don't know.
Does everybody have the volume down? Does everybody have the volume down in their room?
Yes.
I have no volume in my room. I have no volume in my ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that make a difference at all? I just turned it.
No.
Yeah, I didn't touch anything. That's so weird.
Well, that's the beauty of live stuff. It's kind of like live television.
That's right.
When we did that World's Greatest Tribute Band thing, dude, I never break snare drum. Never. Four songs in, 50 million people watching. Right to the drum. Great. What do I do now?
Let me just try. I mean, I don't know. That doesn't make a difference at all, does it?
No, I don't think it's anything.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
I thought
weird.
it was something like on Facebook or YouTube, but nothing's open here.
Hey, Rob, just show us your hand.
Yeah,
Show us your hand. No, with the
Give
stick.
us a traditional grip lesson.
This guy's traditional.
Look at that. I just want to see
Okay.
that.
How do I play traditional grip?
No. What's that?
How do I play traditional grip?
Okay. Well, Roy was the first guy to kind of help me. So all my favorite drummers when I was a kid played traditional. You know, Buddy Rich, Steve Gadd, Dave Weckl, Stuart Copeland. Those were like my drumming gods growing up. So, Roy's left hand was ridiculous. I used to tell him that I would pay him for the hour lesson just to sit and watch his hands. Because his hands were just beautiful. And a lot of it was just how even he got them. And that's the thing, like Roy which I'm still struggling with to this day, even after all this time. His note quality was amazing. Like I'll never forget one time he played a single stroke roll, and I told him, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I'll ever be able to play that fast. He goes, it's not that fast. And he put a click on, and I was like, wait, that's not that fast. And I played it, and of course it sounded terrible. And it's because his notes were so perfect. So Roy kind of taught me, the basics of, having a good fulcrum here. So I had a very loose fulcrum, which that's what caused that bone bruise here from cracking rim shots.
Right.
So he taught me a little trick of like taking, I don't know if you guys can see. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, that
But
looks
he
pretty
taught
good.
me a trick of just cocking my thumb back, almost like a hammer on a pistol, like cock it back like that. So I used to have it too loose, so the stick was always sliding like that. And then he had me cock it back, which works really good for like thumb strokes. So the thing that Bart's talking about is a relatively new thing for me. A NAMM show, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I was at the Remo booth talking with my rep, and I see this kind of older guy come up, and my rep's like, oh, you got to check this guy out. And I'm like, who is he? He goes, oh, he's Jim Kilpatrick. He's this amazing, like, Scottish pipe and drum drummer. I'm like, okay. And he was a very unassuming guy. Oh man, he got on a marching snare and just ripped. And I was mesmerized because the pipe drumming is not like American chord drumming. They hold the sticks really loose, which I kind of like just because of Roy's whole ergonomic thing. And he did this left hand thing where he basically was doing double strokes with his index finger and his thumb. Like it's like playing eighth notes like this, but getting a double. So I got really interested and I started to do research, and I found that in the 80s, the Connecticut Bridgemen under the tutelage of Dennis DeLucia, they did
I'm Connecticut. I'm from Connecticut. So.
Oh, nice. Well, they did a piece called Black Market Juggler in the early 80s, where the snare line, which had Matt Savage in it, had to do a one-handed roll at 120, 16th notes with one hand. And I forget how many bars, but it was ridiculous. So then I'm like, oh, that's cool. That I got to get into that. So then I started digging around YouTube. And there's actually a really unassuming, great drum teacher. I think he's from the South. His name's Chuck Barczyk. He's on YouTube. And yeah, I never heard of him either, but I found him because he does a really good job of explaining it. So the thing that I like about this technique is, when you use finger technique and match grip, like the way Roy taught me was like, the fulcrum, which Tony changed a little bit for me, but Roy had me use the standard fulcrum. He said, this is like your alpha dog, and these are like your sled dogs that provide the horsepower. If you're talking about a team of horses, same thing. So all your control comes from here, and then these fingers serve to kind of help motivate the stick for like faster, more fine polish stuff. So over here, the way that I learned was like, okay, you use your thumb and then you use your index finger. But if you're just using one finger, for me, after a time, it kind of gets tired. So the thing that I like about that I just call it the Bridgeman technique. And, I don't know if Dennis DeLucia stole it from the Scottish guys, or if the Scottish guy, I don't know who invented it. All I know is I like it. And I've been trying to get better at it. I can't get anywhere near 120. If I'm warmed up, maybe I can get to 100. And I can do it with one or the other at 120, but not for an extended period of time. But the thing that appealed to me about this is there's always like tension and release. So you never have to worry about like an overuse injury or anything like that, unless you practice a little too crazy. But I really like this technique, and the thing that I've been trying to work on is incorporating it into a single stroke roll, because we use fingers when we want to go really fast. So trust me, I'm not super fast. So, but the thing is, I could do that forever and not get tired. And then, like,
Are
if
you
you're
just
playing
using the
jazz,
tip of your? Are you using the tip of your index finger there?
so I kind of use the cuticle of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I should probably have my reading glasses on. So that's the thing where, because I have a lot of kids that want to learn traditional mainly because they're in marching band.
Right.
So I kind of start them out doing this, you know, the whole Dave Weckl thing, because it's
Yeah,
much
yeah, yeah.
easier to get the stick bouncing like this. And then as soon as I have them turn their hand into that playing position, they struggle because they go, well, if I'm going like this, then I'm pushing the stick into me. So it's kind of like a feel thing. But yeah, I use like the cuticle, I guess I'd say, like the side of my index finger for that. So that Chuck Barchuk guy I'm telling you on YouTube, I'll give him a shout out. He does a really cool exercise where he basically will and it doesn't really matter which finger you start on. I like to start on the index finger, which is what Chuck does, but I'm not positive. But I think Mr. Kilpatrick starts with his thumb. And by the way, Mr. Kilpatrick, he can do paradiddles, like right, left, left, left.
Really?
Blazing. Oh my gosh, he's ridiculous. Like absolutely
Really?
ridiculous. I've never seen anybody do that with like, and he's barely moving. So you know, like when you see a really good bass player and you're like, how are they getting all that sound? You don't hear any fret buzz and they're barely moving. That's like my goal is I want to be able to play really fast and relaxed without like, you know, with economy of motion. Yeah, but I wish I could take credit for making that up, but I didn't. Yeah, and I'm still, like I said, my goal is I want to get to 120. So maybe on a good day, I'll get to like 104 or something.
That's awesome.
But getting back to Chuck, what he does is he'll play a measure of 16ths with his index, and then a measure of 16ths with his thumb. And then he'll do 2 beats, like 1 and 2, 1 Iana, 2 Iana. He'll do, 4 measures. So 4 measures with all the index finger, 4 measures with the thumb, and then 4 half measures with the index, 4 half measures with the thumb, and then 1 beat, so like 1 Iana, 2 Iana, 1 Iana, 2 Iana, and then finally work down to like 1 beat, which is what you want. So what I'll typically do is set my metronome, start really slow, and set it for 1/8 notes. So I'm getting like beat, boop, beat, boop, beat, boop. So every finger motion I want to put right on the click, and then I'm getting a double for each one of those. And then after I do that for however long I'm going to do it, then what I've been trying to do is work it into a single stroke roll, because I figure like, gosh, if I can get those fingers working, I can play a fast single stroke roll with my fingers without any fatigue at all. So I'll tell you, one of the biggest issues I have is the whole note quality thing that I learned from Roy. So when I first started doing it, because I'm switching fingers, my stick's flying all over the pad. It sounds off. You know, it doesn't sound good because you get a different sound here than you do over here. Yeah. So one of the things I do, especially when I'm doing the Chuck exercise, where I'm just doing like not the actual bridgement technique, but just multiple strokes with my fingers. I'm trying to like zone in right in the center of my pad and concentrate on getting those things to sound as even as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
That is cool, man. Thank you.
Let me circle back around to this. A minute ago, you were talking about drumless tracks, right?
Yeah.
With the song thing, and I don't want to jump off subject, but we couldn't really hear that answer because the audio. What are the drumless tracks you use? I threw out Tommy Igoe. I use a lot of his stuff, but there are other things that you use, so that maybe somebody interested with them.
So, thanks to the advent of Rock Band and Guitar Hero, which I'm sure increased all our rosters over the years,
Yeah.
uh, because like Rock Band, they obviously had to buy the licensing to get the original songs. But for some reason, and I don't know, I'm not very techie, but I don't know if they're OGG. There's some kind of weird files, but a lot of those are on YouTube now, where it's like the actual song from the studio recording of like Rush or something, just without the drums.
Oh,
So
really?
there's also a lot of like isolated drum tracks. I'm sure you guys know that too. So that works really good. Like a lot of times, if I a lot of my students want to learn something famous, like, oh, I want to learn "Fool in the Rain." Like, okay, we're gonna be on this one for a while. But what's cool is I can bring up that drums isolated track, and then YouTube has that feature where you can slow it down 75 or 50. I find if you go 25, it's too slow. But like where you can really hear everything. So as far as drumless tracks go, if a kid wants to learn something like Believer, by Imagine Dragons, that's a popular one with my younger kids. It's easier to find more, I guess, popular tracks. And then another thing I use YouTube for a lot is I notice a lot of people, they don't have what I call musician ears yet. So when they hear a song, their ears go right to the melody and the lyrics.
Right.
And it's hard for them to pick out, like, well, I can't hear what the snare drum's doing or the bass drum especially. So I use karaoke tracks all the time, especially for my little ones, because, if you're, like that Believer has that almost kind of like a marchy tom thing, and then it comes over to the snare. I can't remember exactly what it is, but then there's a part where the singer does this da 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 da, like triplet phrasing. So all the time the kids want to start copying that because that's what their ears are drawn to, because that's what their ears are supposed to be drawn to. But I use karaoke tracks all the time to make them. Then they only hear the rhythm. They like rhythm guitar, especially. That's what I teach my kids to listen to a lot, is the rhythm guitar, so they can hear the chord changes. So instead of having to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4, up to an 8 or 16 bar measure, if it's a 4-bar phrase, they can feel the phrases rather than the individual notes. So obviously when I'm teaching them the beat, I teach them the individual notes. But then, yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Then what I do is I segue. If they're struggling with the studio version, then I let them play along with the karaoke track.
Oh, that's great, man. That's fantastic.
Rob, you mentioned musicians' ears and being able to pick out the threads in the music of the different strains of the instruments that you're hearing. And of course, that's one of the critical pieces to learn in order to be able to transcribe. And I know you've transcribed a ton of drum charts. I myself have done the same thing. So I'm really curious to talk to you about that and ask you about your transcribing process. And I know you give your charts away for free on your website. Is that right?
That's right. And there's a really good reason why I do that. Number one is I have a really hard time asking for money for something that I feel is my interpretation, because I can't guarantee that they're correct, especially with my 55-year-old ears. So I've just never felt comfortable. I've had many peers tell me, dude, you should sell those. You should sell those. There are professional transcribers, like I think his name's Brad Schloiter is one. These guys, they're the ones that will transcribe like the air conditioner one thing that was on YouTube, and like they'll transcribe like Vinnie Colaiuta's solo. Yeah, that's above my pay grade. So if you notice at the top of my transcription page, I have a disclaimer that says, one, all of these transcriptions were done for students. So sometimes there's different. Because I just got an email yesterday from some guy in Italy, and he's like, hey, man, thanks for your transcriptions. They're awesome, but I notice there's mistakes on them. And I'm like, yeah, I guarantee you there's mistakes. Number one, I guarantee you they're not 100% accurate. I can maybe say they're 90% accurate. Number two, sometimes there's different versions of songs and kids want, oh, I want the live version or whatever, which is a pain. Those are miserable to record because of the sound quality. So that's why I don't charge. I just, it's a comfort thing for me. I would never tell anybody else, hey, don't charge. And I get people probably once or twice a week, hey, I'll pay you to transcribe this. I usually refer them to, I have a couple of, there's a guy up in Northern California that used to transcribe for Modern Drummer in the 80s. I recommend guys like that. I'm like, if you want to pay, I want you to go to somebody that I trust, you know, and plus I don't really have time. So my transcriptions are a part of taking lessons with me. So my students, they don't pay extra for that. So I used to obviously do it handwritten, and I had an old program back in the day called the Amazing Slow Downer.
I remember that. Yeah.
Okay, that's what you use.
Every day.
It's a really great program. So the thing I like about that one is you can slow stuff down by increments rather than be beholden to YouTube's, 75 or 50. The only issue I have is like where the songs come from, because like a lot of the Apple Music's copyrighted, so it's hard to like, unless there's some trick, I don't know, to get those copyrighted songs or whatever, some kind of protection to get those songs into the program. But yeah, I used to do handwritten stuff. And then what happened was when the Mars Music I spoke of earlier, when they went out of business, they had to liquidate fast. So the guy that ended up becoming my business partner when we opened up the music school, he was a little more hip because he was like 10 years younger than me. He's a little more hip to the tech stuff, and he grabbed 2 finales, and he's like, "Dude, these are $600 programs. They're selling them for $100." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Even if you don't know how to use it, buy it." So I bought it, and of course, finale is like way more powerful than what I use it for. But it's all I know, and I'm sure there's better ways I could do stuff, like some of my friends do really nice transcriptions where, they'll put in like, intro, verse, chorus, intro. They do all and then sometimes they'll even put key lyrics. I usually will handwrite those in on mine. So the other reason why I don't do that, it's because, like I said earlier, all my students learn differently. So I put them up there for free. And if people can use them, cool. If they don't, if they want to bag on them, which they've done, I don't care. I don't really care. So thank you, Rick. So what I do though, is when the student comes in, then I can handwrite on them and I show them, I teach them how they can also make like an on-the-fly chart. So I teach them the difference between a note-for-note transcription and a roadmap chart.
Right.
So,
well, I got to tell you, man, in all my years of using your charts, and I emailed you, I don't remember what the song was. I found one where you had a second ending issue. Like there was repeating. I said, "Hey, Rob, check out this chart." And you got right back to me like, "Oh yeah," and then you fixed it. And I don't remember the song, but it was just. It was so. I mean, the transcription was right. You just had a weird, and you fixed.
A lot.
It was awesome
because I do like the copy and paste thing. Plus, I'm old. My eyes are gone. My ears are gone. So I love it, and I've had people from all over the world thank me and then say, "Hey, but I think there's a problem here." So I check it, and if there's a problem, I'll fix it. And I'm like, "Hey, man, thanks." But like I had somebody with "I'll Melt With You." There's like 15 versions of that song where sometimes it goes longer, and somebody will say, "Oh, this isn't right." And I said, "Actually, it is for that particular." A student wanted, I want the, I don't know, EP, whatever, the long play version. I forget what. So that's why I have that disclaimer up at the top. But I guarantee you because I catch them too. I'll catch them when I'm teaching. because that's when I really see it. It's like, oh shoot, I made a mistake there. And I guarantee you, like on some of the more, like Avenged Sevenfold stuff where the rev was just ripping like 30-second notes, I guarantee you there's probably some errors in there. But I think mine's close enough to like allow the student to be able to play it, relatively well. So, and that's the main reason I don't charge, because I would be able to sleep at night knowing I'm charging somebody for something that might not be accurate. And there's plenty of transcription sites that do charge, where I think those guys are like, hey, that's what they do. That's like their profession. For me, it's a side thing. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to make these available because if other people might be able to get some use out of them. I've had, mostly it's teachers, but I've had a lot of guys in cover bands just say, hey man, thank you. I hate this song. I don't want to have to memorize it. Now I can just read it down on the gig, and I'm like, cool.
Dude, I've used your charts on gigs. I've used your charts.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I can tell you from my own experience, I've transcribed many hundreds of charts, but only in the last few months started contributing some to a site that sells them. It's called onlinedrummer.com, and they've got a massive catalog, and they're all really, really accurate. But I have to tell you, like, to get my charts from the state they were in to the state where I could feel good about selling them, where like every little ghost note was notated, it was
Right.
a massive amount of work to get it from like 90% to 100%. It's a lot of work. And then, you've got two other guys listening to it to check for errors. And I totally understand what you're saying. And
yeah,
it's a great service you're providing, man.
Well, I
is.
appreciate that. I had a conversation with Bart. There's a couple things that are way out of my comfort zone. Like I don't think I would ever be comfortable trying to like polish a transcription enough because I'm like the type A person where I'm my own worst critic.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that. And there's a couple of things. Bart and I just talked about this last week. Another thing is clinics. When I was at Mars, they made me do clinics. And like, I've seen Chip's clinics.
Yeah, clinics rule.
What clinic did you see, man? Come on now.
Dude, I saw you at the Hollywood Drum Show one time. I saw Chip walk on stage at the Hollywood Drum Show one time. There's a room full of drummers, right? I mean, it's like a room full of drummers, and he just gets up there and lays into Hot for Teacher. I'm like, dude,
right? And he's like,
right.
And
the whole time he's playing Hot for Teacher doing this. I'm like, shit. Yeah.
So I remember at Mars, they didn't give me a choice. They made me judge like the drum off things, which I hated, and they made me do clinics, and I did 2 clinics. And I muscled through them, but I don't feel comfortable doing that. I'm going to leave that to guys like Chip who just own that. I mean, that was, your clinics are so good. And I saw Bart's clinic. I'm the type of guy where I'm really into like the technical aspect of stuff. And I want to know like how guys, not only how do they play technique wise, but like gear stuff. And Bart's clinic is a clinic on clinics when it comes to that stuff. I'll tell you that. But clinics, I don't do clinics. I don't sell my drum transcriptions, and I don't do group lessons. I used to do those at Mars too, and that was like herding cats for me. I'm not into that. So I kind of feel like I know what my thing is, and my thing is the one-on-one teaching that I wish I would have had when I was younger. That's me in a nutshell when it comes to the education stuff.
Yeah, and the world needs that, man. And knowing what you're good at and what your strengths are that's wisdom, Rob, for sure. And I want to let you know, I use your drum charts with my students, and I think you're really humble about them, man, because I think they kick butt, man. I think they're excellent. you know, there might maybe a little thing here or there, but it's so minimal, and it doesn't even matter, man. It's such a huge resource. So I encourage every drummer to check out Rob's website and check out those transcriptions. And then you've got some great lessons in there too. There's just, it's more than just charts on your transcription page. So
thank you.
It's a great resource you've provided for people. So thanks.
You really are, and that's the thing. I mean, you're providing it. You know, it's something that kind of is what the Drummers Education Connection is all about. It's about providing something to help people. You know, if you're always taking, I mean, you're not. You know, what good is that? You know, I think giving back. And well, what you had said a minute ago, what you and I talked about the other day when I called you about this, and I'm a big believer in this. What you touched on, I love it. I always want to be the drum teacher that I didn't have, and that's what you said, and I just applaud that so much. That being said, let's talk really quickly because we're getting up there in time. But let's talk about your playing career, because you did in 1995. You won the CCMA Drummer of the Year award, and you've played in numerous bands, and you still do play live. Talk to us a little bit about your live playing stuff and things like that.
Okay. Well, like I said earlier, because of the whole like upbringing stuff, and my parents were awesome. I love them to death. But I started much later. So my first real gig, I was actually working for the probation department, because my education, I have a degree in criminal justice with an option in law enforcement. I originally wanted to get into law enforcement. So I got my college degree because I thought, well, if I get hired and I have my college degree, then I can work up to like an administrative level. And then I took the job at I live in Orange County where Bart lives. I took a job with the Orange County Probation Department, thinking, I'll get some, life experience, because prior to that I was pretty sheltered. And then I learned like that really wasn't my thing. So that's when I decided I think I want to do some music. And at that point, I was really naive. I thought, the only way you can make, money playing music is you got to be like in, the Rolling Stones or some famous band. And I had a friend that I'm pretty sure Bart knows, a guy by the name of Matt Hawking. He's an amazing guitar player. I met him when he was 16 years old, and he shreds. He went to GIT up in Hollywood. He played with Edgar Winter. He played with Neville Staples. Played with a bunch of people, but I'll never forget. He told me, I'm playing in this corporate band called Surf City, and it had John Cowsill from the Cowsills on drums. He goes, we're going to Aruba to play for a bunch of women for the Limited Company. And he told me the grip he was making, and I was like, that's a thing? That there's like, wait, you're playing covers? And how much money are you making? And they're flying you? And I was like, corporate bands. Yeah. So that was kind of my goal early on, but I got to it through a circuitous route. So my first gig was with a country band that I auditioned for on a Thursday. They called me midnight on Friday morning, said, you want the gig? I'm like, yeah. And they said, okay, well, we're doing a video for Warner Brothers this weekend. So I actually had to like sick out of my probation day gig to go film this music video. And then the girl that the band named Cadillac Blue was backing had interest in Warner Brothers. And the goal was to go to Vegas and then tour back to Nashville, re-record her demo with the live band, because she had like drum machines and stuff on her demo. And I was like, yeah, this is my ticket out. Well, of course, that didn't go well. Too many egos and substance abuse issues made that crash and burn. So then I got with kind of like an alternative band called Scotland Yard, which was led by two really cool friends, Kim Cahill and Chris Hill. And they kind of had like a Berlin vibe meets Garbage, because this was like late 90s, early 2000s. And then I did some touring with a contemporary Christian hard rock band named Liaison, which that was like my first time touring, and I was playing to a click. the band leader, a guy by the name of Larry Melby, awesome guy. He kind of like Tony. He's like, "You're doing a drum solo." I'm like, "I don't do drum solos." He's like, "You do now." So I was like, "Okay." But that was a lot of fun because their first album used Jeff Porcaro. Their second album used Vinnie Colaiuta. Their third album used Greg Bissonette, and Dan Huff played guitar on everything. And I was like, okay, those are pretty big shoes to fill. So that was a really great experience. And then at the time Scotland Yard was winding down, that's when I was getting more into teaching. And when my son was born, I was like, he was born in 2003. I'm like, I don't want to miss anything with him. So that's when I really started to look to get into like a corporate type band, which I ended up getting into a band called Party Jones, which I had been playing with them up until the pandemic for about 16 years or so. And we got to do, my best gig ever was for United Healthcare. We did a gig in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. And it was the equivalent of my friend Matt's gig in Aruba. I'm like, okay, I've arrived. So I wish I had one of those gigs every month. But yeah, it kind of came full circle.
That's great, man. That's awesome. Well, Rob, let's do this. We got to sign off here. And I hate to make it abrupt like that. But
no, that's okay.
Everybody's got to get going. We're all teaching today, as you are.
Yes.
So first of all, thank you for taking time to do this. Secondly, let's do this. We're having we kind of a little tip of the thing for next week. We're having a show next week where we're having some guests from past episodes on. Since we had some sound issues on this one, let's get you back in again on one of those in the coming future, if that'll work okay with you. And we apologize.
I would be honored.
Yeah, sorry about that. The technical issues, but that happens from time to time. And then to let our viewers know too, and the people that follow us, we have our own. We have a website coming soon. Jeremy, what's the name on the website again? I forgot what it was.
It's going to be Drummers EdCon. So like Drummers Education Network, shortened to drummersedcon.com. And that's under construction, but we'll have it up shortly and we'll let you guys know about it.
Very cool.
Nice.
Very cool. So, Rob, once again, thanks for being patient with us on our technical issues. I tell you what, I'll give you a call a little bit later.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, Rob, you're just the best, man. Thank you so much.
Man.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure to have you on, Rob. Great to meet you.
Pleasure, Rob.
It was good meeting all of you too.
Yeah, and
we're fans of yours.
We're huge fans, and we'll have you back on, man, in the real near future. You're the best, buddy.
Awesome.
Okay, guys.
Take care, brother. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you guys. See you next week.